So, my name is Brad. We're going to be talking a little bit today about LigerMobile, which is something I helped out with. A little, I don't know, prologue to that. So this is me a few years ago in Marsh 7, giving a talk I called PhoneGap plus jQuery mobile equals awesome. So a few years ago, even back then, I really thought that hybrid app development using technologies that I was already familiar with, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that these things would allow more people to develop mobile apps. Who in here is an iOS or Android developer? Okay, a few. I pity all of you. The tools are largely terrible, particularly on the Android side. The emulation's unbelievably slow. iOS, I've never seen a language so tied to an IDE. People who run Xcode, from a developer standpoint, it's like they took everything that we learned as developers and threw it out the window and decided to start again. It was the worst parts of .NET Studio and all of that. And so it really bugged me but I wanted to develop mobile, even back then. And so when things like PhoneGap came out and allowed me, who I've done back end, front end, and everything in between in terms of the web stack, to use the skills, the knowledge that I already had, it's been a long time getting, to build phone apps, I was all on board. And so I gave a talk then on it, but I also, even in that talk, I addressed some of the things that I thought failed, and really some of the drawbacks of it. So I've been really lucky over the last year or something to help build what I think is the better, it's not better than PhoneGap or better than Cordova or whatever, but it solves a lot of the problems that I saw with hybrid app development. I'm going to walk you guys through what we did. So we call it LigerMobile. We're trying to come up with a name for a hybrid thing, and for anyone who's seen Napoleon Dynamite, it's a liger. It's pretty much my favorite animal, so had to go there. If during this you have any questions, feel free to tweet them. Just use LigerFTW as the hashtag, and if I don't get them today, I will get to them at some point, or one of the other core Liger guys will get to them. We always look at it, and I'm going to do some of those right now. So the Liger team, this is, actually, let me blow this up. I'm Brad Marsh, Twitter, I'm Barbecue Hacker. I do front-end, mobile development, and anything and everything between. John Gustafson, who couldn't be here today, he's the iOS genius. If there is a takeaway from this talk, it is work with people that are smarter than you, and you will look good. He makes me look good all the time. Alec Plum, he handles the Android side, and then Robert, who's in the back of the room, he kind of handles like utility stuff, like command line interfaces, stuff that we're working on for the future. And then Tony Collin, who just gave a talk on radio, he also helps out too. So I should have added his name. And you can follow all of us at Twitter at LigerMobileDevs. All right, so what is LigerMobile? It's a hybrid app framework for mobile development. And really what it was is we started almost a year ago working on a new mobile app for our company that we were told, hey, you're going to build this, and we're the mobile team. And a directive came kind of down on high that you're going to build it in a hybrid approach. We want as much shared code, particularly UI code, to be shared as possible. And being that I built a number of hybrid apps before using things like Cordova and PhoneGap, people started asking me questions about what I would do, what I would change, and I had a list of stuff I hated. And so we built the app solving those problems and solving some other things that came along, and we ended up with a tool set that we'd use to build the app. And then what happened is we got a chance for a hackathon to build another mobile app, and we only had like a short time span, so we decided, well, I could build the UI code in the stuff that we built Liger with, or we built Edge with, which is the name of the app, and the other guy could start pulling out pieces. So we literally extracted a framework from this other app that we built, if that makes sense. All right, so that being said, what is a hybrid app if you're going to develop one? Well, today, who in here has ever built a PhoneGap or Cordova app before I go? OK, good, a number of you. Today, most of those apps are simply a custom browser that the entire app runs in a single web view. Does that make sense to everybody? Like if you're building an Angular app, you're building a single page web app. All right? And to a certain extent, I am both a proponent and an opponent to single page web apps, in that things like Angular make them very nice and very easy to use, but you also end up with a really polluted DOM, and sometimes it gets just really hard to wrap your head around everything that is on your screen at one time. And so a hybrid app is, generally speaking, that flow. And so ultimately, it's just a custom browser that you wrap an app in. The good points of that is you can run the same HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in both iOS and Android. And for anybody who does mobile app development, you know that you essentially end up writing your code from scratch twice. I write games all the time. I've released 3 games in a month, last month. And they're all iOS. And I got a ton of requests for, hey, where's the Android version? And I'm like, I'm not writing it again. It just has no draw to me. But with hybrid apps, you get the best. You get to write the one code base for both of them because you're writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Another advantage is that you can take advantage of the stuff you've already written. Because we've all written tons of HTML, CSS, JavaScript that we use on websites, corporate, whatever. We have tons of it already at our fingertips, so we don't have to rewrite a lot of code. And then it opens up to more developers. So I can take, for instance, it's not often in an iOS or Android project that your designer can code something. It just doesn't happen. All right? Our designer puts code into our repo all the time because it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and he knows how to do that. It's nothing I have to worry about. So you open up to far more people. Anyone who's ever done a PHP site or anything of that vein, or just straight HTML, could now do a mobile app, becomes a mobile app developer. And it's faster to market. When I was kind of tasked with creating the demo that I'm going to walk you through today, I spent more time looking up an API that I could use than I did building the app. So I can just launch it faster to 2 places than I ever could before, because I don't have to write it twice. What are the bad points of hybrid app development? Well, traditionally, they're non-native menus, toolbars, and anything else. So because you're working in a single web view, and mobile browsers, particularly some in Android, aren't all that fast. To do certain animations, like at an iPhone, if I click a link and it goes to the next page, I expect it to be buttery smooth. I expect that nav bar to flow. I expect that the change to be seamless. Everyone know what I'm talking about? It looks beautiful, all right? And if you do it as a single page app, it's just not going to, which the whole talk I did, I point that out. You also end up with, sometimes you end up with memory leaks because you're doing everything in the same DOM, and if you're not careful, you can break some stuff. And then you're reinventing the wheel because you have to recreate that header bar and that nav bar and all the things that would come locally if it was a native app. All right, so what did we do? We came up with a solution that kind of, in our opinion, was the best of both worlds. You can either use HTML-based pages or native-based pages. Meaning as a game developer, I can write my games in SpriteKit so that I get all the performance benefits of Objective-C, but I don't want to take the time to write my title screen and my leaderboard and all of that jazz, the stuff that I could whip together in an HTML page in about 10 seconds in Objective-C and Xcode, because I just don't like it. All right? So I can switch back and forth between them. But to do that, we had to build a conduit so that we can main state between pages. So in ours, you're not doing a single page app. You're doing a bunch of little apps that you then pass data back and forth to. So we ended up building that. We ended up, just as a side benefit, building all native HTML menus. And native menus or HTML menus. We got a toolbar for free, because that's all native. And the biggest one, in my opinion, is native page transitions for everything. So anytime you instantiate a new Liger page, it's fully native, the flow between everything. And we're going to see that in a minute. OK? So we improved on the normal flow that you would have used to build a hybrid application. And for this to work, we took the exact opposite approach to what Cordova does. Cordova essentially is, again, a single page app. So what we did is we broke it down and looked at each page as its own application so that we could instantiate new ones and then pass the data to it. The beauty of that being that we get all native transitions and everything just looks like a native application. You have to really look hard to see that a Liger app is not fully native. This used to be called, there was one slide in here where it was like bad points, and it was called stuff John didn't like. John is our iOS developer, and he is the most nitpicky person I've ever met in my life. And I say that with love, because the guy's awesome. But he would literally sit and stare at things like, that doesn't look native. I'm just going to have to fix that. And he would spend the next 16 hours fixing it. So as a result, we ended up with a really nice way of doing it and a really nice framework. All right, this might work for you. If you want to build an app that is just calling your APIs, that has a fairly linear workflow, or you're looking to prototype, which is, I've used this already 3 times for doing this. If I have an idea for an app that I do not want to take the time to build, I could whip up 3 HTML pages, change my app.json file 1 time, and boom, I have a native app with 3 separate pages and a fully native menu, and no one would tell the difference. And I can hand that to a potential client, and they can play with it, and they go, oh, this is the app I want built. And as I do freelance on the side, as a freelance guy, there is nothing more valuable than getting your client to experience their idea before you build it, because as all of you know, they're going to change it. And this allows you to get those changes out and done and hammered through before you do any work, real work. Does that make sense to everybody? If anybody who does freelance, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then if you already have a bunch of HTML and JavaScript, this is for you because your work's already done. All right, so here are some of the repos. This is all open source. It's free. You can go download it, play with it anytime you want. The main one is github.com/ReachLocal/Liger. From there, you can get to any of the other ones. There's an iOS repo, Android repo, and a common repo. And the common repo is the JavaScript HTML side of the project. In addition, there's a 4th repo down here called LigerMobile Workshop. You'll see another link to that in a minute. If you have a computer and you want to go to that, it might save you some time. This is what we'll be walking through here in a few minutes, where we show the example of how a working app can be built very quickly. All right, so the demo app, what are we going to do? Who in here loves the BBC besides me? Anybody? I love BBC, Sherlock especially, all those shows, Death in Paradise. It's great. I wanted to have an app where it just let me know when the new Sherlock season 3 was coming out. So I found out BBC, all of their website is an API. So using that, I'm able to build an app that's going to get a list of all the upcoming crime shows, give me the show specifics, give me the specifics on the series overall, display an upcoming list of any episodes in a series, and then ultimately allow me to add some favorites or even tweet about them or share them however I want to do. And all in not too many lines of code. Again, this is the repo that I'm going to be going through. The full workshop is up there. You can download it right from GitHub, and you can have a fully working project. It's broken out in steps, Git steps, so that you can go to a certain area, play with it, change it, and really see how it works. And this is also great because, for example, one of the prototypes I mentioned a minute ago, I literally just cloned this project, changed 2 things, and I had a working prototype. So it's really nice way to go. So code and questions, and feel free to interrupt at any time. So what does this project do? I'm going to go ahead and just play this app from the beginning. Oh, am I on Wi-Fi? Come on, connect. Ah, dang it. Is this working? OK. OK, here we go. Wi-Fi's back. All right, so this is an upcoming screen. This lists all of the shows from BBC's API that they say, hey, are in the crime genre. We can click into one of them, say this one right here. This is going to give me the information about a particular show, its details. If I want to share it or whatever, I can then click in farther to get the details about the individual series. I can click in farther to see all the upcoming episodes. And I could go back here to the series. And you notice everything is fully, you notice how slow the Wi-Fi is. That picture took like 30 seconds to load. This is just pulling straight from their site. So let me click on this again. What am I doing? I'm actually creating a new instance of a UI view, a UI web view on the fly, passing in the data to it and have it create itself instantly. The benefit of that is all of that transition stuff is native. So you get a hybrid app because all this code, all this visual stuff you're seeing, that's all HTML. But all the creation is native. This menu you see, let me go back to it. This is all native, but I don't have to do anything for that. So how did we accomplish this stuff? And what, ultimately, as developers, how can you guys use it to build things quickly and efficiently? All right. So in the LigerMobile workshop. This is the workshop. This is fully set up. It's Git steps. You can do anything you want. But the stuff we want to focus on right here is the interesting part. If we want to display a page, say this upcoming page, what is actually happening? Well, the first thing you need to do to add a page to the app is add it to the app.json if you want it in the menu. You notice the upcoming page, when we first opened the app, was the one that showed up. This is the page that showed up when we started the app. It did that because it's the first page listed in this app.json file. And what the app.json file is we knew if we were sharing code, UI code, between Android and iOS, we needed some shared file that we could reference in both cases to give Android and iOS the build information they would need. Does that make sense to everybody? So we just created this app.json. It exists in the app. And the first file in it is listed upcoming. And what Liger does, again, I said we could use native or HTML, is it goes, hey, there's a page there in our menu. Its name is called upcoming. But we created this concept called page. And in iOS, you have views. And in Android, you have what? Fragments or what's the other term I'm looking for? Activities. That's what I was looking for. And we didn't want like nomenclature to be all messed up. So we created just our own. We just call it page. And so we have a page called upcoming. Now in this case, upcoming is just an HTML file. So what Liger does is when it tries to load a page called upcoming, it goes, hey, is there an upcoming.html in my root directory? And if there is, it loads it. If there's not, it goes, hey, is there an upcoming view controller in my iOS native side? If there is, it loads that. And Android, the same thing for the activity. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's no configuration on my part. It's all taken care of by the framework. So if I wanted to replace this page with a native page right now, I could. All I'd have to do is create an upcoming view controller and delete upcoming.html. Does that make sense? So for prototyping, that's a huge time saver. All right? So when we give it a title. So what's going on in upcoming.html? When it's being loaded, what's going on? All right, so this is all upcoming HTML is. For this workshop, I've pre-included things like jQuery, Bootstrap, underscore. Those are just some extra libs I brought in for prettiness and clickability and whatever. But the heart of the matter is we bring in 3 files. Cordova.js. Liger is built on top of the Cordova framework. We use it mainly as the JavaScript to native bridge component. Does that make sense to everybody? We don't use really any of their modules for, what are they called? The plugins. We don't really use any of those. We just use this one bridge functionality because it exists. So we bring it in. Then we bring in Liger.js, which is the framework that we're building that does all the work. In addition, we bring in the Page.js. This is what you as a developer would interact with so that we can make changes to Liger in the background and not break your code. So we built an interface. The API that we interface with all the time is Page.js. So anytime we want to open a page, or close a page, or do anything, we call page.somefunction, and magic happens, which is nice. So we have a little bit of an underscore template here, which is just going to throw through a list of shows. And then ultimately, I have a page container. What really is happening is we're calling page.initialize upcoming. So page, this is that interface that we work with. And what page does is because we use Cordova and because Liger has some data passing elements as a part of it, Cordova and Liger need to initialize properly before you can really use it. Okay? So we created this workflow that it has to flow down. So when we want to initialize something, we just call page.initialize and we pass it a name. And it goes and it initializes Cordova properly. It goes and initializes Liger properly. It gets any data that we might have passed to the page, which we're going to go over in a minute, and gets everything ready for you guys to use. All right, so what is upcoming.js then? Very, very simple. So there is now dynamically created, there is an object called page.upcoming. And we wanted, in this case, the ability to refresh the page. So we just tell Liger that, hey, the user can refresh this page. And then go ahead and set it up. And instantly and automatically, this refresh button is created for you as part of the native functionality of the header bar. All right? And then in this case, that's the only additional features we want to add. So we go ahead and initialize the page. And this is just straight JavaScript that you would see on any HTML file anywhere in the world. We call an initialize function that goes out to the bbc.uk, gets a list of the upcoming files. So it's upcoming.json from their crime schedules page. It takes that information back. It passes it to a successful fetch, which just builds an array of show information. And then ultimately, all we do is we call the underscore template, or handlebars, or Angular, or insert your new shiny JavaScript MVC framework here. It will work. Pass it the information. It builds the template and renders it out to the screen. Does that make sense to everybody? But this is where it gets more interesting. So what would have, for anybody who built a Cordova app before, or PhoneGap app before, this is where you would have had, hey, we want to view the show information. Awesome. Now what we have to do is we have to build out all the show information in the same DOM element, and then we get a whole bunch of stuff, and then this JavaScript file starts getting bigger, or you include more JavaScript files, and you start getting crazy global namespacing issues, and all of a sudden your code gets really messy and sloppy. And not only that, when you go to actually view the page, you're going to get a nasty, slow, choppy animation probably, and it's just not going to be pretty. And it's not going to feel native, and everything needs to feel native anymore. If the App Store has proven one thing, like I love reading the stats on whether mobile web or like mobile apps are winning. Does anyone else read that? They have those stories on Hacker News at least like once a week. Mobile web is just never going to win. It's just not as pretty, and people have proven they want pretty. Like the audience has spoken. And so that's what native apps delivers. And so we built that in, because that really bugged me, and it certainly bugged John. So if we want to then open a new native view, pass some data to it, because in this API call, we got the show's title. Everybody can see here, we got title. We got its subtitle. We got its start time. We know who's providing the program, or BBC 1 or BBC 2 or whatever. We got the program information, which is a whole object, like descriptions and whatnot. So we have everything we need to show information about that show. So how do we get a new page open, and how do we present information? All we do is we say, hey, anytime the show details link is clicked, call page open page. I'm going to call the page details, a little header bar. I'm going to call it details. It's going to reference a page, whether native or HTML, called show. In this case, we have a show HTML, so it's going to reference that. And we can pass it some arguments. In this case, we're going to pass it a key called show, and we're going to pass it all the information about that show, just the particular index in the array. Does that make sense to everybody? Make my font bigger.
Can we turn the light off over here?
Sure. Kill any light you want. You don't have to look at me at all. Oh, pretty. Oh, that's funny, Joe. Nice. It's always the people you know that heckle you. You ever know anybody done this talks before? It's terrible. Anyway, so now we're calling page open page, we're giving it show details, and we're ultimately passing information about the show. So what's happening? So when I click this link, it's calling page open page. So we come here. So what's happening on this side? How does this page know how to create itself, take the information we've passed to it, and build a fully native page instantly, and keep all of the native look and feel? Well, let's check it. So show.html is, again, just more straight HTML. We include the exact same files. We just build an underscore template that's not really that much more complex. We show the title, the subtitle, all the information. If it has a picture, we just display it. That's why it might pop up a half a second later, because I'm actually pulling it from the BBC. And then ultimately, we're just calling page initialize show. So what's show do? How does this magic work? Right here. So page has been initialized properly. So when it calls show.initialize, page can have extra information about itself, about this page, about this instance of a page. In this case, it has argument information. We've passed to it that argument called show, which has all the information it needs to know to build the information about this show. Once it has taken that in, it goes, hey, I just need to display it now. And all we do is we pass the show to the template. Does that make sense? So it costs me no extra work to create a new instance of a page, pass it all the information it may need to know about itself, and then just render the details. Like, this is just simple, straight HTML. Very, very simple, nothing complex about this. Which is a front-end developer I love, because Saves me time and energy. I've got this stuff down pat. So what are some then other nice features that you can do with it? Well, for one, you notice that on this stuff that we've got these share on Twitter, share on Facebook links. So let's just click one of those and see what happens. I haven't set up a Twitter account on this, but so I clicked the link, and it called the Twitter application, the native one that y'all have built into your iPhones or Android or Facebook built in. And I passed it some text. Be sure to check out the name of the show whenever it's supposed to be playing. And if I had an account set up, I could send it right from here. And you can do the same, say, with Facebook. So how did that happen? You know, and then more importantly, what else does Liger provide that makes all this easy? So to do the Facebook or Twitter thing was just this easy. So we call this page object, and we say, hey, what other cool things do you have? Open dialog with title. So you notice that in this case, it didn't open a new page. It just did that little dialog window. So we call open page with dialog. In this case, it says Twitter. And then we pass it the title Twitter. We pass it the page Twitter. So we have created a list, essentially, that needs to be better documented for sure of, what's the word I'm looking for? Words you can't use. There's a word for that. Someone help me out. Reserved, thank you. Reserved words. Twitter, Facebook, any of those social networks that your phone comes built in with, based upon country. We have one. There's one for China. All of those, and they come in automatically because there's already a Twitter view controller and a Facebook view controller, and there's all these other things that you get automatically. And all we did is we call them. I could replace Twitter. If I created a twitter.html here, it would call that. I don't have to, and I get all of this functionality for free. I'm just calling something that the phone already knows about. Does that make sense to everybody? So really nicely and very, very quickly, I've been able to create 2 pages from one API call. All fully look native. They show the information. You could certainly make the HTML, the stuff that's on the screen look more native. This is just Twitter Bootstrap's basic theme. You could certainly take the time to make it look really pretty and more native, but I didn't. And then we've accessed Twitter and Facebook. And we created, when we opened that dialog with title, we created a hash with a key of text and a value of what we wanted to say. Be sure to watch the name of the show at when the show starts. And you can see exactly how we did this in this workshop. I go step by step. You could copy and paste this entire repo, and you could go step by step and create the entire thing from scratch. But it's pretty fast. All right, so what else is there? So what happens when I click this link? Now we go to the, oh, that one doesn't have it. OK, good. Does this one have one? Some of them don't have all the information. Only certain shows have full details about everything. And apparently, it doesn't. But one thing that is nice, so let's just go what would have happened. The series page. The series page is a little bit different. When you're going to a series, say like Sherlock or whatever, that show knew everything it needed to know about the show. But it doesn't really know anything about the series as a whole. So what can we do? Well, we have the series ID and the show information. So in this case, we can pass the series ID to it via the link. And we can take it, and we can go and get the details about the individual show, just like we did in the upcoming list. And then we can, if it's successful, if the fetch is successful, we can go do a lot of things, like show the series news or show the series extra. And there's all kinds of things. And actually, now that I think about it, didn't that second one work at the beginning? So maybe the internet just died again. Come on. I hate the internet. In addition, one thing that we did do was we created a list of favorites. So we use, the other nice part is local file storage and things like that. They come fairly easy on iOS and Android. That's not really a problem if you want to create files and manage those and everything like that. But as a web developer, we also have stuff that we would have access to via HTML5, like local storage. So for the show information, if I wanted to say create a list of favorites, it would be as easy as just going local storage.favorites and passing it the show information that we could then display on some other page. So you get all the benefits of it being a fully HTML-driven, HTML5-driven page that you would normally get. And I've used this for lots of things, from local storage to local SQL, you know, the SQLite instance. One of my first, actually the thing I showed forever ago in my first mini bar here was a little drawing game. And all I did was I took and allowed people to draw via JavaScript. And I took that code and saved it as a 64-bit encoded ping right to the database. And again, I didn't have to do anything on the native side. So you get all of the benefits. In this case, we're using local storage. Let me just see if restarting this will make it a little bit easier, because I noticed the internet might hit me back. Let's see. Not connecting to the internet. Awesome. There it goes. All right, let's see if it's working well enough to get the show. There, perfect. All right, so this is the show series information. We called the show, we got the series ID, we passed it to the series, and this is what it showed. This would probably be a good part to talk a little bit about a little bit of the architecture stuff. So we got to this page a few minutes ago when the internet was working, and we could call the series ID API and have information returned. And then I just tried to go back to it a couple minutes ago, and it didn't work. Nothing came up. The beauty of that is anybody picking up on what that's actually doing? It's killing it from the stack. It's doing all the memory management for you. So when we're creating these pages on the fly instantaneously, if you leave those pages, except for first pages in the stack, those get knocked off the stack automatically. Killed in the memory, saving you space, saving you time, and you don't have to think about them. One of the things that I ran into with Cordova apps is, because I was doing them single page apps using like jQuery mobile and it's single pages, everything remains in the DOM. And you know, I might leave something. My programming style is a little more hackerish than I would like to admit, is I would leave things going and blow up memory. I'm not even gonna lie. Particularly in games where the game loop is always going and I'd have to worry about certain things going. But this, because we're killing them and knocking them off the stack, we lose all that information, which is why when I tried to go back to it, it just didn't load itself. But you can control that too. All right, so here, there's an Add to Favorites button, which just allows me to add it to local storage. So if we go into Series, we have a Add to Favorites.click. It just gets a favorites array, which is just my local storage.favorites, adds it, and then throws a little pop-up. So now we could actually go and we could drag this. Again, this is a native menu. This is built in for you. We could go to the favorites page, and we have a favorite. We could go to that. And seriously, I hate the internet. Come on, just load. There we go, finally. And we could go, hey, we have everything we need to know about the show. Let's view all the upcoming episodes. And there it goes. So again, we have a pretty fully featured app here, and we haven't really done any work for it. So far, we've made 2 API calls, a call to local storage, and the rest is just straight HTML. The beauty of that is it's no real work. I mean, you don't have to know anything about Objective-C to make that to happen. And to add that favorites page to the menu and to make it work, all I had to do was add it to the app.json. Again, it just looks for a page name favorites.html. Okay, and I gave it the page name favorites. In addition, other things that you have, like email, you can put in anywhere, whether it's a native window or an HTML window. So for instance, in our menu, we have a support link. All that does is it calls the native email functionality and posts it to the screen. So how do we make that happen? We just say, hey, we want to call page email, which is one of those reserved keywords that we have that calls the native view controller. So email functionality, Twitter functionality, Facebook functionality, all the things that you would want to put in a fully native app, you get for free. Good question.
What about like GPS, accelerometer, those kinds of things?
We haven't had to use it yet, but you certainly could get it. And in fact, HTML5, I haven't really played with it too much, but HTML5 has a like GPS like location. You could do it that way, or you could certainly build. So we've built different things as plugins to our own little system. You could certainly make a native controller that handles that, and then that Liger has as a reserved keyword to access that information. Yeah, anybody questions? Now is a good time for questions because we only have 15 minutes left.
In these pages, you still have access to the Cordova APIs, though, right?
Correct. Yes. So if you actually go as far down as you can to the Liger.js, you'll see that all of them are simply Cordova execs. almost all of them are Cordova execs so that we access that, that native bridge. So yes, you have full access to call Cordova.exec.
So just before we go too much further, two caveats that you didn't mention that I think we should throw in.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm one of the people who's worked on this with it. One, we have no connection to the VDC.
Oh yeah, there's an about page. Let me bring that up so that I don't get sued.
We've made it very clear that this is not for you to build and distribute in an AI
Yes,
store.
don't take this.
And the VDC gave us permission to say that we are not connected to the VDC. So that's one important point. Another is you'll find that there are going to be some pieces that do not have feature parity between Android and iOS, and that's because our company's application hasn't needed them yet. So if you do run into things like there are some of these native pages that he's able to show you on iOS that don't exist yet in Android, we intend to get to them, but it's an open source project, and it'd be awesome if you got to them and help us out. So that's another possibility there too. So anywhere where you bump into things not being full parity between these two OSs is because our commercial app that is built on this didn't need it yet.
Yep.
So, sorry. But we wanted to share anyway. And another thing that we're moving toward and have not done yet is a suite of command line tools so that you can do a lot of this without having to jump into the IDE. So like Brad had said, he's not real happy with having to use Xcode, but he did show you a bunch of stuff in Xcode, and we understand the irony of that. It's just that what do you have time to build? You build the important things first, and then
Questions?
What's debugging like?
Hey, great question. For people who know the little tricks, it's easy. For people who don't, it's probably a pain. With the same pain as you would get with any hybrid app. So let me fire up Safari here. All right, so we have an about page here. And say there was an error in my JavaScript, and like most people know, if I go to say like about.js, all it does in this case is literally render a template. But if I just put a bunch of nonsense in here, it wouldn't run. And how would I debug that? How would I find out what's not working? Well, what I do is I fire up Safari and I turn on developer mode. And I can go in here and I can go, hey, my iPhone simulator, let's go in here, and then I have full command line access. So I can say, oh, I don't know, let's go and look at the about object. Or, hey, something's not initializing, I wonder why not. So let's just go ahead and call about.initialize. And it rendered it twice here because I'm doing an append. I actually left this example. Does that make sense? And then if about the object didn't show up at all, I would know that there's actually a syntax error in my JavaScript. So that's like anytime that I can't get something to work, I just jump in here real fast. I actually just always keep it open and just try to type the name of the object. If that doesn't work, I know I just made a syntax error. So yeah, I debug everything through here. And the beauty of it is, it's the full inspector you normally have, so you can do all of your HTML debugging and stuff like that as you normally would. The tools that we've all gotten used to. Other questions?
What next? Where are you guys going to
So our
startup? Or?
No. So we work for a very large company, and we were lucky in that we were told, hey, build a hybrid app. We got to extract the framework to just give away to people. But it's a big company, and we're lucky to have the backing of them to just keep going as a mobile open source project, and we'll just keep building our app. And as things come in, so like the roadmap for this, one of the things that we had to do, just almost as soon as we were done with this, is hey, we're taking this app worldwide. It needs to be fully internationalizable. Okay, so we had to figure that out. So now one of the next big pushes to the Liger framework on all levels will be internationalization support. Right after that, we're doing push notifications. So the next big roadmap push will be push notifications and anything and everything in between. And everything will work right through the page object as it does right now, and so it'll stay really, really simple. But no, we just keep building it as we build our app, we contribute more to it, and we've got some other people contributing their ideas, particularly for iPad stuff. So good question. Other questions? Never had this few questions before. I'm a little taken aback. I must have sucked.
Yeah, how do you compare your framework to something like AppSeller, Titanium, or other solutions that are sort of in between the?
Yeah, so in the case of Titanium, they're all, ultimately you're just running fully native stuff, writing kind of JavaScript-ish like code. So they're kind of their own thing for sure. So I really don't compare it to that. The only ones I really do compare it to are the ones that are more like Cordova, PhoneGap, that vein, that are just trying to present you with a single window. And that was the route we were kind of told to take. And that just presented a lot of problems that we didn't want. One thing that comes to mind that I didn't really address that is very important is you'll notice that we created when we went to the upcoming page, we went from upcoming to show, from show to series, from series to upcoming information about the series in general. So what we're actually doing is we're creating pages in a stack, okay? Upcoming 0, upcoming series, whatever information, say 3. What happens if you do something in 3 that you need to affect 0? Does that make sense? So I have someone edit a form on my 3rd page in the stack. So I need that first page to reflect those changes. So we also have all of these other functions that we have. So if I go to favorites, for instance, this is a great example of this. Favorites, every time the favorites is going to show up, it initializes itself and reruns initialize. So it re-renders the template. The reason it does that is because if you go to templates, say first, the very first thing you do when you open the app is load up templates and you don't have any, we don't kill off that page because it's the first in its own separate stack. But if you go and add a bunch of pages to your favorites list, it used to be that if you came back to it, there was still nothing there. You would have to manually refresh it. So we go, that's why we added things like on page, what is it called? On page appear, or refresh, or close to page, or close to page with arguments. So we can say, do things elsewhere in the app, close to a certain page, have it affect the data that's there, reinitialize itself, or pass data back to it. So you're not limiting yourself. That was the, I don't know if anybody had that question, but that's a question we've gotten. I've done this talk a couple times, and that was always a question I got is, if you get far in the stack, you're not limiting what else shows up. And these pages are always running in the background, so you can pass data to them any way you want, any time you want, and have them re-render themselves or have them kick off some other kind of process that you might need to know. Say a location thing, that would probably be a great example of that. If you have a page running some type of information about GPS and you're off doing something else, you could keep passing that location information to elsewhere. Other questions? Anybody? OK. That's really all I got. I could keep going, but really was hoping we'd have a little bit of question answer time. You can go to the repos. Again, you could go to the LigerMobile workshop off of ReachLocal/Liger on GitHub, and that will take you through this entire application. You can go step by step with Git, play with it, branch it, add in your own stuff, put in some other API, and see what you get. You can go in once you're in it. If you just go to GitHub or download the repo, you could go to page.js or Liger.js and see the individual functions you get, like page, open page, close to page, what these mean and how these work. It's pretty well documented in the code. Maybe not on the repo, but if you go to the code, the actual code itself, the stuff is pretty well telling you what's going on.
So how can I trust that your code is going to keep working?
Because we have a big application out there that we can't break. So you can trust that it will keep working because my job depends on it.
How about testing?
Oh, yeah. So I'm not a huge code testing guy, but if you want to write a fully testable BDD style application, you can. In fact, the very first version of this and the version that I did for our company of this workshop is fully BDD and had 100% coverage on everything on the JavaScript side as well as the native side. And Liger iOS and Liger Common, you can pull either of those repos and run the tests. We use Jasmine for Liger Common for the JavaScript side, and we use XC tests on iOS, and I can't even remember the Android one. So yeah, it's all fully testable, and you can write tests. But tests aren't as fun as hacking crap together. So, any other questions? We have cards back there if anyone wants to just take some. And again, if you have any questions, just hit us up on Twitter at LigerMobile Devs or hashtag LigerFTW. So thanks.